Hello, and welcome to Historical Humans Reads, where we take primary sources and bring them to your screen. I'm Colum Coleman, and today we are reading from Strategemata, in English, the Stratagems, by Sextus Julius Frontinus. Frontinus, a Roman soldier and civil engineer, wrote Strategemata towards the end of the 1st century CE. The work itself is composed of a collection of examples of various military strategies employed in the course of Greek and Roman history. The primary purpose of the work was to provide future Roman military commanders with a breadth of tactics and their practical applications as shown through real-world events. As such, Strategemata is largely a collection of anecdotes taken from over 5 centuries of military campaigns. Today, we will be reading Book 1, Chapter 1, on concealing one's plans from Strategemata. With that, let's begin. 1. On concealing one's plans. Marcus Porcius Cato believed that when an opportunity is offered, the Spanish cities which he had subdued would revolt, relying upon the protection of their walls. He therefore wrote to each of the cities, ordering them to destroy their fortifications and threatening war unless they obeyed forthwith. He ordered these letters to be delivered to all cities on the same day. Each city supposed that it alone had received the commands. Had they known that the same orders had been sent to all, they could have joined forces and refused obedience. Himilco, the Carthaginian general, desiring to land in Sicily by surprise, made no public announcement as to the destination of his voyage, but gave all the captains sealed letters, in which were the instructions on what port to make, with further directions that no one should read these unless separated from the flagship by a violent storm. When Gaius Laelus went as envoy to Syphax, he took with him as spies certain tribunes and centurions, whom he represented to be slaves and attendants. One of these, Lucius Statorius, who had been rather frequently in the same camp, and whom certain of the enemy seemed to recognize, Laelus canned as a slave in order to conceal the man's rank. Tarquin the Proud, having decided that the leading citizens of Gabii should be put to death, and not wishing to confide this purpose to anyone, gave no response to the messenger sent to him by his son, but merely cut off the tallest poppy heads with his cane as he happened to walk about in the garden. The messenger, returning without an answer, reported to the young Tarquin what he had seen his father doing. The son thereupon understood that the same thing was to be done to the prominent citizens of Gabii. Gaius Caesar, distrusting the loyalty of the Egyptians and wishing to give the appearance of indifference, indulged in riotous banqueting while devoting himself to an inspection of the city and its defenses, pretending to be captivated by the charm of the place and to be succumbing to the customs and life of the Egyptians. Having made ready his reserves while he thus dissembled, he seized Egypt. When Ventidius was waging war against the Parthian king Pacorus, knowing that a certain Pharnaeus from the province of Thracetica, one of those pretending to be allies, was revealing to the Parthians all the preparations of his own army, he turned the treachery of the barbarian to his own advantage, for he pretended to be afraid that those things would happen which he particularly desired should happen, and pretended to desire those things to happen which he really dreaded. And so, fearful that the Parthians would cross the Euphrates before he could be reinforced by the legions which were stationed beyond the Taurus Mountains in Cappadocia, he earnestly endeavored to make this traitor, according to his usual perfidy, advise the Parthians to lead their army across through Zeguma, where the route is shortest, and where the Euphrates flows in a deep channel. For he declared that if the Parthians came by that road, he could avail himself of the protection of the hills for eluding their archers, but that he feared disaster if they should advance by the lower road through the open plains. Influenced by this information, the barbarians led their army by a circuitous route over the lower road, and spent above 40 days in preparing materials and in constructing a bridge across the river at a point where the banks were quite widely separated and where the building of the bridge, therefore, involved more work. Ventidius utilized this interval for reinforcing his forces, and having assembled these 3 days before the Parthians arrived, he opened battle, conquered Pacorus, and killed him. Mithridates, when he was blockaded by Pompey and planned to retreat the next day, wishing to conceal his purpose, made foraging expeditions over a wide territory, and even to the valleys adjacent to the enemy. For the purpose of further averting suspicion, he arranged conferences for a subsequent date with several of his foes, and ordered numerous fires to be lighted throughout the camp. Then, in the second watch, he led out his forces directly past the camp of the enemy. When Emperor Caesar Domitianus Augustus Germanicus wished to crush the Germans, who were in arms, realizing that they would make greater preparations for war if they foresaw the arrival of so eminent a commander as himself, concealed the reason for his departure from Rome under the pretext of taking a census of the Gallic provinces. Under the cover of this, he plunged into sudden warfare, crushed the ferocity of these savage tribes, and thus acted for the good of the provinces. When it was essential that Hasdrubal and his troops should be destroyed before they joined Hannibal, the brother of Hasdrubal, Claudius Nero, lacking confidence in the troops under his own command, was therefore eager to unite his forces with those of his colleague, Livius Salinator, to whom the direction of the campaign had been committed. Desiring, however, that his departure should be unobserved by Hannibal, whose camp was opposite his, he chose 10,000 of his bravest soldiers and gave orders to lieutenants whom he left that their usual number of patrols and sentries be posted, the same number of fires lighted, and the usual appearance of the camp be maintained, in order that Hannibal might not become suspicious and venture to attack the few troops left behind. Then, when he joined his colleague in Umbria after secret marches, he forbade the enlargement of the camp, lest he give some sign of his arrival to the Carthaginian commander, who would likely refuse battle if he knew the forces of the consuls had been united. Accordingly, attacking the enemy unawares with his reinforced troops, he won the day and returned to Hannibal in advance of any news of his exploit. Thus, by the same plan, he stole a march on one of the two shrewdest Carthaginian generals and crushed the other. Themistocles, urging upon his fellow citizens the speedy construction of walls which, at the command of the Lacedaemonians, they had demolished, informed the envoys sent from Sparta to remonstrate about this matter that he himself would come to put an end to the suspicion. Accordingly, he came to Sparta. There, by feigning illness, he secured a considerable delay. But after he realized that his subterfuge was suspected, he declared that the rumor which he had come to the Spartans was false, and asked them to send some of their leading men, whose word they would take about the building operations of the Athenians. He then wrote secretly to the Athenians, telling them to detain those who had come to them, until, upon the restoration of the walls, he could admit to the Spartans that Athens was fortified, and could inform them that their leaders could not return until he himself had been sent back. These terms the Spartans readily fulfilled, that they might not atone for the death of one by that of many. Lucius Furius, having led his army into an unfavorable position, determined to conceal his anxiety lest others take alarm, by gradually changing his course, as though planning to attack the enemy after a wider circuit. He finally reversed his line of march and led his army safely back, without its knowing what was going on. When Metellus Pius was in Spain and was asked what he was going to do the next day, he replied, "If my tunic could tell, I would burn it." When Marcus Licinius Crassus was asked at what time he was going to break camp, he replied, "Are you afraid you will not hear the trumpet?" This has been an excerpt from Strategemata on Historical Humans Reads. If you enjoyed this video and would like to hear more excerpts from original texts, please subscribe to be notified of the next one. If there's a work you would like to hear, be sure to like the video and leave a comment listing it below. As always, thank you for listening.